All right, so today we are in the second chapter of Paul's letter to the Colossians. And today, I want you to put on your detective hat or your cloak because there's a lot going on here and you got to kind of connect the dots a little bit. And so first, we got to start out remembering is that this is a letter, meaning it's like hearing one side of a phone call. You have to figure out exactly what's happening on the other side, or at least generally what's happening on the other side. So in chapter 2, he starts out and he's like, I want you to know how great a struggle I have for you and those people in Laodicea and everyone else who hasn't seen my face. So the first question is why? Why does he want to know that? Just for fun? Is he like patting himself on the back? Is he trying to make people feel guilty? No. He's trying to add weight to his argument. He wants them to know that what he's going through is not easy, but it's worth it, right? So listen up because this is worth it. Now, if you were with us when we did some of the other books or letters that we read through, I told you that it costs somewhere around $3,000 to write a letter. So that alone is enough reason to listen up. Like, this wasn't a cheap thing for Paul to do. But he's in prison and he's struggling, but it's worth it. So what's worth it? Why does he need to get word to them? Well, told you yesterday there were three types of teaching that were polluting the purity of the message about Jesus. This pursuit of knowledge, which ended up being called Gnosticism eventually, this pursuit or worship of idols and other gods, and these Jewish practices that were getting like woven into following Jesus. So very quickly, he kind of like, I don't know, deconstructs all three of these ideas in just a couple of sentences, but he does it without saying he's doing it. So he's like, okay, so I'm struggling for you, but it's worth it. And here's what I want for you. I want you, he says, to attain true knowledge of God's mystery, a full understanding, full assurance of understanding, resulting in true knowledge of God's mystery, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. He's speaking to people who are looking for knowledge. And so he's saying, there it is. It's in Jesus. In verse 4, he says, I say this so that no one will deceive you with persuasive arguments. There are people that are convincing them, like, no, it's not in Jesus. It's in this Gnostic movement. He's like, nope, don't listen to them. Then he goes on a few verses later and he says, see to it that no one takes you captive through philosophy and empty deception in accordance with human tradition, the elementary principles of the world rather than in accordance with Christ. He's like, okay, elementary, what is he talking about? Well, in the next verse, he says, in him, all the fullness of deity dwells in bodily form. Now, is that just a random fact about Jesus? No. He's like, watch out for people that are going to try and convince you that deities, like gods, other idols, like they're out there. He's like, no, it's all the fullness is in Jesus. And so he's taking apart their pursuit of false idols. Like, nope, not there either. And then in the same sentence, he takes apart the Jewish practices. He's like, in Jesus, you were circumcised with a circumcision performed without hands, meaning it's internal, it's circumcision of the heart. Circumcision was a sign of the ancient Jewish faith. And this was one of the arguments, like, oh, you got to get circumcised if you want to follow Jesus. He's like, no, when you believe, it's like you're circumcised internally in the heart, which is a weird thing if you're not used to the value and impact of circumcision in that culture. But just like that, he takes apart their pursuit of knowledge. He's like, nope, if you really want that wisdom and knowledge, that's in Jesus. He's like, if you are looking for gods who are real, he's like, there's one, it's Jesus. And he's like, if you think you need to be part of those Jewish practices, no, it's all happening internally. Life change happens by trusting in Jesus and in his love for you. That's how that's how transformation happens. Now, indulgence, that was on my mind. He says in the end, there are all these arguments, persuasive cases people are going to present. He said they're going to have an appearance of wisdom. They're going to look humble. People might talk about visions they have of angels, but he says none of these things are of any value against fleshly indulgence. That's the word. Meaning indulgence is like embracing these carnal, selfish desires we have. He's like, trusting in Jesus creates life change and it causes you to not do things that are so selfish because you're trusting that there's someone bigger and better who has your best in mind. And that's what transforms the heart. He's like, all of these other things, yeah, they might look spiritual with self-made religion and wisdom and humility, but they're not. They're not actually going to change you. So it's really, this is a very defensive chapter. He's saying, watch out for these things and don't let them take you captive. Meaning, believing these things, it's like a bond. It's like putting you in bondage because you begin to feel like you've got to work to earn your approval for God. He's like, you don't. Life change happens as a result of trusting in Jesus. It's not Jesus plus, it's only trusting in him. Now, fun little extra credit, if you're interested, you could go read Ephesians chapter 2. And what you're going to see are some similar themes, mainly the whole idea of being spiritually alive, like being made alive because of God's love for us. Like he steps in and makes the first move. But in Ephesians, it's all wrapped around this idea of the Jews and the Gentiles being unified because that was the issue in their church. Here, he weaves this right into watching out for false teaching, those three big false teachings that I mentioned before. But he weaves this same theme in there in the same chapter. Now, he didn't put the chapters in there, those were put in years after. But what's kind of cool is he's using the same material, but he's adjusting it to the needs of his audience. He also wrote these two letters at the same time in the same place, and he sent them to be delivered by the same person. So Tychicus, which is a cool name, was the messenger. We know this because at the end of both letters. He had the letter to the church in Ephesus and Colossians in his pocket, and he ran or rode or whatever, and he delivered them both. And so they're similar message, but they're tailored to different cities and different needs of the different people in that different situation. So it's pretty cool. All right, hope that's helpful. I know it was a lot. Tomorrow is a little bit more practical, so stick with it. I'll see you then.